Welcome to today's Retail Dietitians Business Alliance webinar, Stay Strong with Family Meal Strategies. FMI's Staying Strong with Family Meals Barometer research reveals that the majority of Americans plan to continue to have family meals to stay connected to their loved ones, building on the habits bolstered during the pandemic. FMI's U.S. Grocery Shopper Trends 2021 study shows that the desire to balance pleasure, health, values, and convenience still forms the backbone of how consumers think about and practice notions of eating and cooking well. Helping your shoppers understand how to make nutritious, delicious, and convenient meals will likely make family meals more achievable and enjoyable. In 2020, cannedfoods.org, sponsored by Bush's Best, conducted a nationally representative study among retail dietitians and consumers. This research revealed a significant gap in knowledge for the benefits of canned beans. Jessica Broom, PhD of Southpaw Insights, will present this data, showcasing the opportunities to elevate consumer awareness about the benefits of canned beans and where retail dietitians can help close the gap. Crystal Register, FMI's Director of Health and Well-Being, will bring this to life for supermarket registered dietitian nutritionists as well. Please remember that cannedbeans.org has a sponsor page on the RDBA website that is loaded with tools for educating shoppers. Please also note that this webinar has been approved for one continuing ed credit for dietetic professionals. And during the course of the webinar, feel free to add your questions to the chat box. And then at the end, we will moderate those questions. So with that, Jessica and Crystal, welcome to RDBA. Neither of you are strangers to us. And Jessica, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you so much. As mentioned, my name is Jessica Broom. I am a survey methodologist and market researcher. My company is Southpaw Insights. I'm a lefty. I hope some of you are as well. And we worked with Bush's Beans to do a study among RDNs and consumers all about beans. So attitudes, consumption, knowledge. I learned more than I ever thought I would about the humble bean and uncovered some really interesting findings, especially highlighting these gaps between what RDNs know and what consumers think. Our study fielded online last March 2020, and we wrapped it up right as the country was shutting down. We heard from a nationally representative sample of 1,403 American adults, as well as 304 RDNs. This is a snapshot of who we talk to. This is consumers, and consumers look like what the country looks like, right? About 40%, 40% were in the South, a little over half had under 50K household income. Just about a third have a college degree or more. I like to show this slide to level set a bit. I think for some of us who might live in big cities on the coasts and collect graduate degrees for fun, it can be a surprising reminder that not everybody in the country looks like or lives like me and my friends. The RDNs we heard from had a different demographic profile. So they were over 90% white and female, 80% were 35 and older. The vast majority of them worked in hospitals or private practice. We actually did not hear from any supermarket RDNs. You're an elusive group, but I look forward to hearing how these findings resonate, knowing that you're in this setting. So one of the key takeaways from this study was that RDNs are extremely pro-bean. 9 out of 10 agree that beans are a healthy, nutrition-rich food. 8 out of 10, so 82% of RDNs say they eat beans themselves at least once a week. And we asked RDNs, what do you make a conscious effort to include in your diet? And of course, we heard vegetables, fruit. Beans were number 3, so ahead of dairy, fish, oats, poultry. RDNs are on our side. They like beans, right? And RDNs have high awareness of a lot of the specific health benefits of beans. So they know beans can help promote digestive health. They can help lower cholesterol, help prevent heart disease. Some of these benefits of beans, are a little less well-known among RDNs, right? So we see fewer RDNs recognizing benefits like beans can help control your blood sugar. They can help people lose weight or maintain weight, prevent cancer, help to increase life expectancy. So I show this slide to point out that while RDNs know a lot more than consumers, as you'll see, there's still some room for education among this audience. RDNs want everyone to reap the benefits of beans, right? 90% say they're very likely to recommend beans to their clients. 2 out of 3 RDNs say they are frequently recommending beans. One of the very first questions we asked in the survey, so before people even knew that the study was all about beans, was just, what foods do you think Americans should eat more of? So open-ended, unaided, people could say whatever they wanted. And almost 1 in 5, 18% of RDNs said beans. Interestingly, for me, our friends at Bush's Beans had asked the same question in a study 15 years ago. So 2005, they did a study of RDNs, asked the same open, unaided question: what should Americans eat more of? And at that point, only 9% of RDNs said beans. So we could interpret this as the group of RDNs who are really hardcore bean fans has virtually doubled in the last 15 years. Consumers, though, only about half of consumers, 52%, said they eat beans at least once a week, compared to, as I mentioned, 82% of RDNs. This is up a little from that 2005 study that found under half of consumers eating beans regularly. It's still quite low among 18 to 34-year-olds. We see that group really under-indexing. Only 40% are eating beans at least once a week. So there is still work to be done on educating consumers. And I think despite the best efforts of RDNs to advocate for the bean, consumers really just don't know. So you can see here how they compare to RDNs on knowledge of all these health benefits. The turquoise circles at the top are what I showed before. These represent awareness of different benefits among RDNs. The navy circles in the middle represent awareness among consumers. So there's definitely an information gap here. People just don't know about many of these benefits. And I will point out that the gap is biggest, or knowledge of the health benefits of beans is generally lowest among that 18 to 34 group. Those are those purple circles at the bottom. So RDNs know beans are high fiber, low fat, low sugar. Consumers just don't know much. They're just not clear. What's interesting to me, though, is that we ask consumers, what's important to you when you're choosing what foods to eat? And even though amount of sugar and amount of protein, those larger circles that I highlighted on the slide, are relatively important to consumers when they're choosing foods, they don't seem to recognize that beans actually are a fit. Beans actually meet their needs in these areas. I also wanted to call out sodium a little bit. You can see here that 43% of consumers say sodium is an important consideration when they're deciding what foods to eat. Something I learned working on this study, this is new information for me, was that an easy way to reduce the sodium in canned beans is to drain and rinse them. About 3/4 of RDNs say that they tell people to always drain and rinse canned beans, but only 41% of consumers say they're always doing this. So that's another gap we see, and something, potentially a communications angle if you're talking about sodium. So when consumers are choosing what foods to eat, taste is always first. We know that. In general, we see nutrition, these issues like amount of sugar, nutrients, amount of protein, are more important than the circles you see in the bottom right, representing importance of things like environmental impact or sustainability of farming. This brings me to talking about the sort of uphill battle around plant-based diets. So RDNs recommend moving towards a plant-based diet. They're pretty consistent in that. And they told us a lot in some quotes about the benefits of just taking baby steps in the direction of plant-based, ways to sort of ease consumers into this style of eating. So making non-meat items the center of a dish, experimenting with new foods, going meatless once a week, just sort of baby steps. We're not trying to force anyone to go full vegan, but just in the direction of plant-based. Consumers, again, are not on board with this. So only about a third, you see there on the left, say they either follow or are moving towards a plant-based diet. 41% are not into it. They say plant-based is not for me. But when you look at those two numbers on the bottom right, I've heard of plant-based, but I don't quite know what it means, or I've never heard of it. I think of that as sort of a movable middle group, that maybe if they knew more, they could be more interested. And this is about 1 in 4 consumers. So it's not a small group. And it's even more pronounced among that 18 to 34 group. That needing knowledge cohort goes up from about 26% in the general population to 33%. So 1 in 3 18 to 34-year-olds might potentially lean more towards plant-based if they knew more. As we're talking about plant-based diets, I think we need to call out protein, right? This is something consumers think about. As we saw, it's important to them. Close to half of consumers from 18 to 54 are trying to follow a high protein diet. And they know 87% say, yes, beans are a source of protein. However, they're divided on how the protein in beans stacks up to meat. A quarter think it's more, a quarter think it's less, 22% say they're not sure. I think we need to set the record straight on how beans fit in a high protein diet. How does the protein in 1 serving of beans stack up to 1 serving of meat? Moving on to focus on canned beans specifically as a component of a plant-based diet. Consumers have not quite caught up to RDN's pro-canned bean sentiment. So we see 80% of RDNs saying canned beans are an easy way to eat more plants, but only about a third of consumers agrees with this. And this goes down to about 1 in 5, 18% of those 18 to 34. RDNs are also way more likely than consumers to say the benefits of canned beans outweigh the negatives. The Bush's Beans study that I mentioned earlier from 2005 found at that point, 59% of RDNs said the convenience of canned beans makes them an acceptable alternative to dried. We see a big jump since then in the last 15 years. So our study in 2020 found 75% of RDNs agree with this. And RDNs are at this point more likely to recommend canned over dried or frozen beans. But when we look at what RDNs recommend versus what consumers are including in their diets, that's where, again, we see some big gaps. So canned beans, dried beans, even frozen beans, those are the turquoise numbers on the left, are all way more likely to be recommended by RDNs than to be eaten by consumers, as you see in the numbers in navy on the right. So the question begs the question, what is keeping consumers from eating beans? I'm just going to pause here. If you have any 10-year-old boys in the vicinity, you might want to put on your headphones. The next few slides are all about flatulence. This is a quote from a consumer who put it politely: beans give me gas and I prefer not to experience that. But we did see that half of consumers say that eating beans causes gas. I think this is a big issue. I thought it was interesting that only 28% know that if you eat beans regularly, you adapt and don't experience noticeable gas or flatulence. We actually see a negative relationship between frequency of bean consumption and agreement with the statement that eating beans causes gas. So among infrequent bean eaters, 59% think they cause gas, but this drops to 48% among that group who are eating beans at least once a week. And I think this brings us back to the need for education among consumers. I think sharing this fact that if you eat beans regularly, you adapt, will probably surprise a lot of people. So what is the solution? How are we going to talk this up and get consumers to eat more beans? I think first you need to close some of these knowledge gaps. People just don't know that this inexpensive can of beans has a lot of value in terms of health and nutrition, things that are relatively important to them. Nutrition, sugar, calories are all important, as we've seen, but consumers always go for taste first. And I know this from every study we do. If I don't like something, if my kids don't like it, I'm not eating it. So one of the questions we asked was, what cuisine do you eat regularly? So Chinese, Italian, Middle Eastern. The number one answer was Mexican. And this gives me hope for beans. I think showing the benefits, clearing up the protein question, reducing the gas, and easing consumers into a cuisine that we already know and like Mexican, will help to get people on board the bean train. In terms of communication, I think it's important to point out only about a quarter of Americans get their nutrition information from RDNs. They're a lot more likely to hear it from a doctor or from friends and family. That's why the idea of supermarket RDNs is really exciting to me. I think you have to meet people where they are and sort of ease them into the idea of beans. And I think you all have the power and the platform to do that. I'm really excited to hear your reactions to the findings and any questions. But first, I'm gonna turn this over to Crystal Register for the RDN perspective.
Great, thank you, Jessica. So I know many of you in the room today from the cross section of our professional roles through the years, and it's always so nice to reconnect with you, and I'm so happy to be here. It's always nice to meet new faces too. And I come to you today wearing many hats, at least 4 that I can think of. So first and foremost, I'm a fellow registered dietitian nutritionist, so one of the RDNs Jessica mentioned. Second, I've been working at FMI, the Food Industry Association, for the past year, where I serve as the lead coordinator and issue expert for health and well-being programs and activities, nutrition policy, operations, and communication issues. Third, I come to you with experience as a supermarket dietitian. So I worked with Wegmans for 12 years, focused on company-wide wellness programs, health messaging, community events, and local media response, and actually a few bean promotional programs. And last but far from least, I work closely with the FMI Foundation on the implementation of the Family Meals Movement and National Family Meals Month. So first, I'd like to thank you, Jessica, for grounding us with this great study data and increasing our canned bean comprehension. I'd also like to take a minute to thank cannedbeans.org and Bush Brothers for funding the studies. More importantly, I think sharing the findings with all of us. And I don't know what your reactions are to this research, but personally, I was not surprised to see that many fellow RDNs have a high canned bean IQ. I love the benefits phrase that came out here. But I was definitely surprised to see the many knowledge gaps, Jessica, that you identified between RDNs and consumers. So without question, all of these gaps you mentioned represent opportunities for us as RDNs, but especially those of us in the food industry and supermarket dietitians especially. So in my current position, I sit with a vantage point to see how all these opportunities intersect, and I'd love to share some of my bird's eye view perspective with you. A significant amount of my insight comes from the meaningful research that we do at FMI. And specifically, I want to build on what Jessica presented and share a few highlights from FMI's newly released Power of Health and Well-Being in the Food Industry Report. Consumers report specific approaches to overall eating patterns to include some specific diet plans for a wide range of reasons linked to health and well-being. So some 48% of consumers claim to follow at least one of the following dietary approaches outlined here. And canned beans can fit into the top 3 most popular approaches, as you may recognize: plant-based, and yes, RDNs know even a low-carb diet, beans can fit; lactose, dairy-free, dairy or lactose-free. And clearly, as you look through this list, canned beans fit into almost all of the other approaches as well: gluten-free, Mediterranean, intuitive, whole foods, flexitarian, DASH, and dietary guidelines. I don't think I need to tell any of you how beautifully canned beans actually fit into the new dietary guidelines for Americans. And we know beans are the only food that have been designated to 2 different food groups. So powerful, as they're considered both a protein and a vegetable. So unquestionably, canned beans pack a powerful nutrition punch and support the call to action to make every bite count. So it's a direct scientific connection between food and health that's reflected in the core elements of the dietary guidelines and even this simple image of my plate, linking healthy dietary patterns to improved health outcomes. And to be honest, I think this is why we love the dietary guidelines so much. There's the connection between food and health, and it's based in science. So now we see this increase in consumer interest in preventing illness and strengthening immunity. Consumers are looking to make good food choices. So this desire for enhanced immunity has created a whirlwind of innovation and new products in the marketplace. Something I'd like to remind folks in the food industry of all the time, lest we not forget to include naturally better for you choices and plant-based foods. I often use the phrase sweet potato mission to refer to the importance of including basic nutrient-rich foods in this immune support conversation, like canned beans. So the sweet potato mission is meant to ensure that the most affordable, most accessible, and nutritious foods don't get left behind in the quest for immune support and better for you solutions. The mission is always elevated when partnered with meal ideas, cooking techniques, serving suggestions, and recipes to include naturally plant-based foods, especially when guided by you all, the trusted expertise of the supermarket registered dietitian. And by the way, I feel like I could easily rephrase the sweet potato mission as the canned bean mission, and I'd be equally on target promoting naturally better for you plant-based foods. So our research at FMI shows that 79% of shoppers say they actively look for at least one product attribute when purchasing a food product. So I pulled this chart from our recent US grocery shopper trends data to show just how impressive it is that canned beans align with the attributes consumers are looking for in just about every category listed, right? They avoid most negatives, they're minimally processed, they contain good fiber, involve ethical practices, they're heart healthy, and they certainly include positive nutrition. Not many food product categories could boast so many claims. As we know, the nature of consumer meal planning certainly transformed during the pandemic when consumers were forced to spend more time at home, and the shift in priorities when cooking happened pretty quickly. So consumers increasingly relied on food from grocery stores to support more meals and snacking at home. Again, it goes without saying that canned beans align so well with so many of these priorities. If you look there at the bottom, from minimizing waste and prep time to boosting health and nutrition. So Jessica, building on your plant-based insights, for sure we know this trend is popular with dietitians like us, but we also know that the term, it's not clearly defined even in the health and nutrition world. So the most basic level, we know that getting folks to eat more foods from plants is a good thing, even if we don't define it or link it to a specific diet per se. So FMI's data shows that the pandemic has prompted actually a more practical and realistic approach to eating, quite often based on plants. And clearly, canned beans fit with practical, realistic, and plant-based. So steering consumers to canned beans is an easy way to help as more people jump on this plant-based. For sure, I could go on and on about all the opportunities to highlight the health and nutrition qualities, the versatility, and the affordability of canned beans. But the place where all these messages can come together is quite literally and figuratively the family meals table. Therefore, I'd like to share some information on National Family Meals Month, which is September, as well as the Family Meals Movement. So for those of you who may not know it, National Family Meals Month only started back in September of 2015. It may seem like it's been around for a long time, but in reality, we've only celebrated it 6 times to date. It was created and fueled by the FMI Foundation. And I know that many of you are familiar with the National Family Meals Month, but if you're not, let me just tell you a little bit more about it. So National Family Meals Month was started to encourage consumers to have one more meal together at home each week. We reasoned that if we could get consumers to achieve just one more meal, the results would be exponential. The FMI Foundation created the campaign and all the turnkey materials. Then we worked with retailers, suppliers, and community partners to take the campaign and just run with it. There's no fee to participate, and the response from everyone through the years really has been extraordinary. When we started planning for our very first National Family Meals Month back in 2014, we did a lot of research and found tons on all the benefits of family meals. Here's a quick look back at our very first infographics. And when we were creating these, it was a challenge to select the information to highlight because we just found so many compelling studies on so many advantages that you all know about. People who eat more family meals together have better nutrition, more emotional balance. Kids who eat more meals with their families do better in school. And kids who eat more meals around the table with their families are less likely to engage in risky behavior like drinking alcohol, smoking, or using marijuana. And we thought, if everyone only knew these facts, who wouldn't want to have more family meals, right? So to go one step further, we commissioned the penultimate study with Shannon Robson, PhD, MPH, and registered dietitian, who's an associate professor in the Department of Behavioral Health and Nutrition at the University of Delaware. Robson and her team employed a systematic review as well as a meta-analysis of all relevant studies published in peer-reviewed journals in English prior to December 2018. The results were nothing short of impressive. We were not the only ones to think so. Robson's study was published last year in the prestigious Journal of Nutrition, Education, and Behavior. And if you didn't read the study yet, we're happy to share highlights now. There's also a link to the study in our FMI website. So this study very clearly builds on previous research that provides definitive proof of the value of family meals. The big headline is this. This study proves that more frequent family meals are associated with better dietary outcomes and family functioning outcomes. I'm actually going to repeat that. I'll stay here for a second because it's extremely significant. So this study proves that more frequent family meals are associated with better dietary outcomes and family functioning outcomes. This is the finding that every dietitian participating in this webinar can really cheer about. Family meals increase fruit and vegetable consumption. Overwhelmingly, studies evaluated by the researchers showed a positive relationship between family meal frequency and fruit and vegetable intake. By the way, it's no coincidence that National Family Meals Month takes place at the same time as National Fruits and Veggies Month. So having looked at so many different studies, when examined separately, just fruits or just vegetables, but also when fruit and vegetable intake were combined, there were almost too many varying outcomes to mention, including how fruit versus vegetable and or fruit combined with vegetable consumption changes in people of varying ages or sexes or even time or meal of the day. So the definitive outcome was this: more family meals equals more fruit and vegetable consumption. One regular subtext was that the dinner meal consistently showed a positive relationship with increased fruit and vegetable intake, actually more than breakfast or lunch. So the second major and extremely significant outcome of this study, family meals improve family functioning. Nearly all the studies included in the systematic review and meta-analysis demonstrated a positive relationship between family meal frequency and measures of family functioning. Family functioning is defined as family connectedness, communication, expressiveness, and problem solving. The positive relationship between greater family meal frequency and higher family functioning indicates that family meal frequency may serve as a proxy for family functioning. That said, does anyone need any additional reasons to promote family meals? So let's go back to talking about National Family Meals Month for a minute here. Prior to COVID-19, our campaign was making great progress. Since 2015, we've been working with Nielsen and Harris to actually measure our results each year as well. And we've seen dramatic changes in awareness of our campaign and the importance of family meals, consumer interest and attitudes in family meals, and self-reported behavior change. And if there's one thing we know for certain, this global pandemic has impacted every fabric of our society, including the way we shop, cook, and eat, and family meals. And the big question on everyone's mind is just how much is it impacting us? So since the global pandemic started, FMI and the FMI Foundation have conducted numerous studies to see how this event has impacted food shopping and consumption. In fact, one of our ongoing studies is called the Staying Strong with Family Meals Barometer. This is a frequent pulse check to see how family meal behavior is changing. Here's what we found. We found that family meals are actually one of the silver linings within the dark clouds of this pandemic. In fact, our research really shows that Americans are staying strong with family meals. Let me explain how. For starters, 87% of Americans say they are cooking with their families the same amount or even more than before the pandemic. 86% of Americans say they are having the same amount or more in-person family meals than before the pandemic, and 75% say they're having the same amount or more virtual family meals. Half of Americans feel somewhat or much more connected to their families and loved ones. Of those having in-person family meals, 70% feel more connected. And of those cooking together more, 71% feel more connected. 58% of Americans plan to have more family meals to stay connected in the future. And 45% plan on cooking more together to stay connected. So we may have spent an extraordinary amount of time with our families during the pandemic, but the family meals experience really has been a highlight. As you can see here, 9 out of 10 Americans feel positive about family meals. And we're not the only ones noticing here. The American Heart Association recently released a white paper titled Psychological Health, Well-Being, and the Mind-Heart-Body Connection, a scientific statement from the American Heart Association. And this was published, as you can see here, in the AHA journal called Circulation. This paper supports the concept that sharing a meal as a family has emotional, mental, and physical benefits. And I love this graphic. Family meals can increase resilience, lower the risk of depression, and boost self-esteem. So combined with the data from our study from the Journal of Nutrition, Education, and Behavior, which was published last year, we are able to say with confidence that family meals are good for the heart, again, figuratively and literally. The most comprehensive studies to date prove that family meals improve nutrition and emotional well-being. There's a substantial body of good quality data showing clear associations between psychological health and cardiovascular disease. By the way, as RDNs, don't we love when something is solidly supported by science and research? So great. I'm sure by now you're all saying to yourselves, Crystal, this all sounds great, but how can I promote more family meals? And I thought you'd never ask. So I'm excited to introduce to you some very usable resources that the FMI Foundation has curated over the past 7 years. So we're going to start here by looking at the consumer website that FMI created to tell everyone why family meals are so important. So this website uses easy to understand language that addresses why family meals matter, right along with tips and links to helpful resources. So this website is being updated as we speak. So by the time you look at it, it will be even more beautiful and even more useful. You need to check that one out. So in contrast to the consumer website, we also have created an industry collaborator website with lots of tools to help all of you have more resources right at the tip of your fingers here to promote family meals. For starters, this website offers many different toolkits that you may find useful. So we've tailored them for community collaborators, food manufacturers, and food retailers. And I chose just one here to show you this is the retailer toolkit. So there's many to choose from. Thought this might be the most practical for all of you, but we also created a special toolkit focused on how you get your state to make a resolution officially declaring National Family Meals Month in your area. That's really fun to see. In addition, we created a best practices guide to show you some of the award-winning ways that many partners have successfully developed and deployed family meals campaigns to date. It's a good way to just get some ideas for yourself. And one of the most popular tools we have created is infographics. And who doesn't love a good infographic? So in fact, we've created dozens of them. They make family meals messaging easy, and they're all supported by science. So each year we create a new batch based on the current research. Many are translated into Spanish, and some are also in video form. So they're perfect for a social media campaign or for inclusion in other printed materials. So check those out for sure and use those as well. Last year, one partner even used them as door clings in the frozen food section of a store. We also have on the industry collaborator website, this is where you're going to find our graphics and logos. So you can use these, just grab them and feel free to add them to any of your own branded materials. So having this logo on your materials demonstrates that you have officially, so you can see there on the bottom, raised your mitt to commit to supporting the broader family meals campaign. So let's circle back to canned beans here. Besides all the family meals tools I just covered, I've got really great news for you all as supermarket dietitians. RDBA has worked with cannedbeans.org to develop a toolkit expressly for you. So besides fact sheets, infographics, recipes, and all the typical tools you might expect, this toolkit has other great stuff to really make the supermarket dietitian life a lot easier. So for example, it also has some pre-written articles, editorial calendars, and pre-written in-store scripts. Best of all, these tools are all non-branded. So while they were funded transparently by Bush's Best, the matter of the fact is Bush Brothers is taking the lead on growing the entire category of canned beans. They're very passionate about this. So they're providing this support to just help you get more customers into the canned bean aisle for all the reasons outlined in this presentation. And you don't have to direct consumers to the Bush's Best brand. You may be working with your own private brand of canned beans, and the company will take the responsibility of driving people to Bush's brand themselves. They just want you all to have access to these great tools. So I strongly encourage you to check it out. And if you're looking for a great tool to which you can refer consumers, there's another website just for them, this cannedbeans.org. It's the same, it's just with many, many consumer options you can see across the top: health and nutrition, plant-based diet, versatility, fun facts, recipes. And this is also a non-branded website that will give consumers many reasons and resources to add more canned beans to their everyday meals and snacks. So in conclusion, I hope we've given you a lot to think about today. And I'll go through here in a summary. The best science ever on the benefits of family meals, the latest research on how consumer cooking, eating, and shopping habits and family meal habits are changing since the global pandemic began, updated messaging to help you more effectively promote family meals and all the benefits they impart, and lots of tools for you to access to promote more family meals. And on top of all of that, lots of tools to encourage your shoppers to enjoy more canned beans and tools for you to use to help them enjoy more canned beans. So by the way, our family meals efforts are working so well that we officially have declared what you see here, the Family Meals Movement. We will continue to celebrate National Family Meals Month to really punctuate the importance of family meals, but we encourage you to continue the movement all year round. We thank RDBA for inviting us to partner on this webinar. Thank you, Jessica, for presenting the research, and we thank you for your time and attention. And now we can welcome any questions that anyone might have.
Well, thank you, Jessica and Crystal. Great presentations, both. We do have some questions. Jessica, I'm not sure if you have the answer to this first one, or maybe Crystal, you do. What would be the percentage of decrease of sodium in canned beans when they're drained and rinsed? Any idea? And Jessica, you're on mute. So if you unmute yourself. Now, now you're back.
Yeah, unfortunately, I unmuted just to tell you that I don't know. That's more of a question for Crystal. I saw that come up in the chat and I wonder if you might know. Off the top of your head, that's kind of a specific.
I remember learning this when we were doing some activations, and I could probably reach behind me and find a handout we used to use. But I think it's close to, I want to say 41%, and I don't know, I'm a numbers girl, so 41 sticks in my mind.
So we also have some answers.
Some answers are popping up.
Sherry's
yes, 40%.
It says 40%. Maureen says 40%, and somebody else said yes, 41% is correct. So Crystal, you know, once again, get the answer right. And Deanna also shared that. Also, Jessica, another question from April Sins for you. Do you have any studies that you would recommend referencing as related to the decrease in gas as related to the frequency of intake of beans?
I don't know any studies specifically. Again, this might be a question for Crystal or other dietitians in the room. If you know of any references off the top of your head that talk about this connection.
Certainly not off the top of my head, but I'm sure that's something that we can find and follow up on, because I think it is important for consumers to know that you can, I mean, even if it's a gradual build, one of my favorite tips and tricks I always shared with consumers was to rinse and drain a can of beans at the beginning of the week and put them in a clear container you could see. And maybe if someone's not used to including beans, they could sprinkle a few on a salad, sprinkle a few into a soup, may even sprinkle a few, but by the end of about 5 days, maybe your can of beans is gone, and maybe that slow gradual buildup is also helping with some of the gas issues folks may be experiencing. You certainly wouldn't want a consumer to all of a sudden eat a whole can of beans. I don't know that any of us would want to do that, but there is some truth to that gradual buildup. And yes, we can follow up and look for studies, but that always helped as a consumer build. It's not as intimidating then either. Just include a few beans here and there, and before you know it, you're on the right track.
You made your way through the can.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion about doing it once a week and doing it. So I don't think we have any more questions. I want to thank everybody. And April, we will get back to you with hopefully a study about gas. In the meantime, also I want to remind everybody that on Wednesday of this week, we will have our live webcast on RDBA's Facebook page. It is called Shifting the C-Suite's Focus, back to shoppers' healthy living needs. So it's definitely a webcast that you don't want to miss. Again, Crystal, Jessica, canbeans.org, thank you so much for sponsoring this webinar, and look forward to having you guys back. And in the meantime, more resources on retaildietitians.com. And certainly that toolkit that Crystal was nice enough to show you is on the canbeans.org page on retaildietitians.com. So thanks everybody for joining us. We will send out your continuing ed credit in the next day or so. And also this video will be posted on canbeans.org as well as rdba.org. So if there's any of your team that were not able to join us today, it will be up there for probably the next year so that they can come back and watch it. So thanks all, everybody. And don't forget, eat those beans.